Hey everybody, it's John King. Just wanted to thank you for joining me on my live broadcast today. So I will be sharing with you today some tips on how to avoid issues on an escrow and kind of things that'll come up during the loan process, and how to make sure those don't cause problems with you as you're trying to buy a home and have a smooth transaction and be able to not run into problems. So hopefully this will be helpful for me to share with you for a few minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to post them as I'm talking, and I'll get to those as we move forward. So I'm going to break this up into a few different categories and cover some very specific things that come up and things that you need to be aware of to make sure that you don't run into. So first of all, I'm going to talk about income issues. So income is pretty straightforward. I mean, you hear all the time from lenders, and we say, don't change your job, don't don't do anything that's going to change the information that we've got on file. And that's a very true statement. I'm going to move past those rudimentary things. The biggest things that create issues from an income perspective is, first of all, verifying your employment. We have to double check all of the paperwork that we have received from your employer. We have to get either a verbal conversation with your employer on the phone, or we have to get something in writing from them. If you're self-employed, we have to hear from your CPA. We have to do something to confirm that you are still employed, both when you start the loan process and then right at the end of the loan process. So that can create delays if your employer is not responsive. So when it comes to income, if you have an HR department and they're shutting down for a week for vacation, that's going to be a problem. So we need to know that ahead of time so that we don't try and verify employment during that time, because we cannot and will not fund a loan unless we have validation that you are still employed at the time that we're closing. So that's the biggest thing from an income perspective. Obviously don't change jobs in the middle of escrow, those basic things. But the biggest issue we have when it comes to income comes from verifying the income. The second biggest issue comes from being able to get your employer to break out for us the different types of your income and the confirmation that it's going to continue. So you might have made, $60,000 last year in regular wages and another $10,000 in overtime. Well, we need your employer to confirm that that overtime is going to continue. And so that's another piece that we try and do is we're getting you pre-approved, but sometimes it can be something that we quickly got you pre-approved and are now in contract. And so that's something you just need to be aware of, is we've got to be able to verify and break down that information. So it's really about cooperation from your employer that becomes the key when we're looking at avoiding income issues. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is asset issues. So as I was typing out my agenda, I almost called this cash issues. In the industry, we use the term 3 C's. Capacity, which is your income, your cash, and your collateral, or your credit, credit, capacity, and cash. I don't like the word cash because cash is a 4-letter word in my industry. It is a bad word. Now, when I say cash, I'm talking about green pieces of paper with pictures of presidents. We do not want and cannot use cash when you're buying a home. So every dollar that you're using to buy a home has to be verified on where that money came from. So if you deposited money into the bank that was cash that we might not have seen at the time that you were getting pre-approved, we have to verify all of that and know where that money came from. So do yourself a favor, just don't deposit cash. It's a major no-no that can cause big issues with the loan process if you are depositing cash or make any cash deposits. If you end up with cash and you say, well, gosh, I don't want to just have this money sitting there, I don't know what to do, use the cash to pay for your bills. Use the cash to pay for your groceries or to pay for your gas instead of swiping your ATM card. That's what most of us do. We use the ATM card and we swipe and we swipe and we swipe and we swipe. And all that money comes out of your checking account. Instead of letting that money come out of your checking account, spend the cash, leave the money in your checking account. So that way you can count that money towards your assets when it comes to qualification. So do not deposit cash. That's the number one issue when it comes to assets that can create an issue during the loan process. And then the second piece is, if you're getting money from any source other than your checking account that's been sitting there, we've got to source the movement of money. It does not make my life easier for you to move all the money into one bank account. Some people assume that if you move all the money into one bank account, then that makes it easier because I only have to verify it in that one account. But unless it's been in that one account for over 2 months of bank statements, I'm going to see the money having been moved into that account. I need to prove how it got there. So now you've doubled the work, because now not only do I have to show where it came from and how it got there, but now I've got to prove it in each one of the bank accounts that it used to be in as well. So just leave it in that account. If you're getting a gift from family, if you're liquidating stocks, if you're doing anything that's a little bit unique, talk to me about it, talk to my team about it specifically, because moving the money in the wrong way or at the wrong time can cause issues. So you need to make sure that you talk to us about how you're moving that money so that we don't run into issues. It's the biggest thing that causes issues in a loan when it comes to asset issues is cash. Do not use cash. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is credit issues. So credit reports expire after a certain period of time. So a credit report, depending upon the type of loan that you're doing, is good for 120 days on average. So one of the things that can come up while you're in a escrow period is the credit report that we pulled 4 months ago when you got pre-approved and went out shopping is now expiring. We try really hard to make sure that never happens. So if you are getting into escrow and your pre-approval letter was written a while back and that credit report's going to expire soon, we will typically update that credit report. But we don't want to do that if your credit is fragile. So sometimes we're going to run into an issue where we're hoping that we can close before the credit report expires, and we would talk to you about that. But just be cautious of the fact that the credit score can change when we update that credit report. The second thing that we do is we pull a credit refresh. That credit refresh, we don't look at your credit score again. So we're not going to see that your credit score dropped, but we are going to see what your balances are and whether you opened up any new debt. And if you opened up new debt, we're going to have to count that debt payment against you, and that can cause an issue for a loan to fall apart because I now have to count that new debt. And we're going to see that because you inquired on that debt. We have to verify every account that you had an inquiry on to prove whether a debt was opened or not. So don't open up new credit, not because it will cause major problems, but it'll at least cause delays. Even just applying for credit can cause a delay because now we have to prove that you didn't open new credit based on that application. So that is the credit side of things. Is the biggest issue really comes from having inquiries and us having to validate those and the credit report itself expiring. But again, that should not happen as a surprise. So that's really the key I want to hone in on when it comes to credit issues. The next thing I want to talk about is title issues. So this really doesn't have a lot to do, well, it can. It can have issues from your side. The title company's job is to make sure that there are no liens against the buyer or liens against the property that could remain unpaid and cause problems in the ownership transfer from one person to another. And so if you as the buyer have liens against you, if you have past due judgments, if you owe taxes, etc., those things are often caught by the title company. So if you watched my live broadcast last week, or if you haven't, click on it and take a look. We talk about big changes to credit reporting and the fact that liens and judgments are no longer showing up or won't be showing up anymore on your credit report. That's great, but those things will still pop up potentially with the title company. And so those things still need to be handled, even though your credit score is not impacted. They might need to be paid off if they create a lien that's recorded with the county, because that lien would have priority over our mortgage. Also the seller, all issues related to debts that the seller owes that are recorded on title have to get paid off. And so there can be issues during the escrow process where getting a payoff statement from one of the people who they owe takes a longer period of time. So there can be title issues that pop up, both that are for your side and for the seller's side. The last area I want to talk about is property and seller related issues. So the reality is that there are multiple moving parts throughout this process, and a lot of them revolve around you, the buyer, but a fair number of them revolve around the seller and issues that are outside of your control as the buyer. So the seller's issues have popped up in the past where we've got issues with, again, liens recorded on title that pop up. We've got issues with property condition issues that can come up as problems. We've got issues where, the seller owes past due child support and that becomes a lien, and now the seller can't sell the house unless they pay that off, and they don't have enough money to pay it off. It's crazy, weird things that come up from the seller side, and that's where your real estate agent can really help guide you down that road. There's not much you can do to avoid those issues, but just be aware that although all the other issues I talked about are within your control and within my control, the seller, property, and some of the title issues are not within our control, and there's not a lot we can do. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I really, our job is to make the escrow process a smooth process where we help you to buy the home, to close on time, to make sure that it is not painful. Okay, this is not a root canal. It shouldn't feel like a root canal. Our job is to make this smooth and really help guide you through the process. But just like a good pilot, a great pilot his job is to get you from point A to point B on time and safe. And that's my job, to get you from point A to point B on time and safe. The pilot cannot guarantee you that he's not going to hit turbulence. He's going to look over the radar images, he's going to talk to other pilots that just flew by the same area, and he's going to find out what the weather patterns look like to try and avoid major turbulence issues. But the reality is the pilot is going to focus more on getting you there on time and safe. And if that means he has to fly straight through a thunderstorm, he might actually do that, as opposed to running out of gas and crashing because he tried to take too far of a detour. So that's the same thing I'm going to do. I will warn you if there are issues. I'll tell you to buckle up. I'll make sure I'm not serving hot coffee so you don't spill anything in your lap at the time that we hit some turbulence. So just be aware turbulence can come up in the loan process, but it's my job, just like a great pilot, to get you closed on time and smooth without hot coffee spilling on your lap. So if you have any questions, give us a call. Looking forward to taking great care of you, and have an amazing day. See you later.